This is part 4 of how I've used JavaScript and Articulate Storyline triggers to enhance my eLesson. To recap, I want the Submit button to be disabled when the timeline starts, and for it to become enabled when the user has selected 4 options. Today, I'm going to share with you the solution that I've come up with. We will be keeping a few things from our previous solution, which I discussed in part 3. We are keeping the variable count, which is the variable that keeps track of how many cards have been selected. We're also keeping the triggers for the submit button. So there's this one, which changes the state of the button to disabled when the timeline starts. And this one, which changes the state of the button back to normal when the variable count equals 4. And also for now, we will be keeping the text box that displays the value of count on the stage, so we can see how the value of count changes as we perform our tests. I've also created 8 variables, var1, var2, so it's 1 variable per card, and these variables will keep track of whether a card is selected or not. So as you can see, I've already added the text boxes to display the value of these variables on the stage. And to recap, we create new variables by clicking on the icon for managing the project variables, then click on the plus sign. Now I've already created my variables, so I'm just going to click on one of them to show you what they look like. So this one is called var1, and as you can remember, I call them var1 for the first card, var2 for the second card, and so on. The type of these variables is true or false, and the default value of these variables is false. So when the card is not selected, the value of the variable is false, and when the card is selected, the value of the variable is true. And I've also added triggers for each card. So let's have a look at this one that I've already created. So the action is execute JavaScript, and this is going to happen when the user clicks on the card in question, which in this case is rectangle number 1. In a minute, I will show you the JavaScript that I've used for each card, but before I do that, I just need to let you know that JavaScript can't manipulate Storyline's variables directly. And what that means is that JavaScript needs to transform Storyline's variables into something it can work with, then do what it needs to do with it, then change it back to something that Storyline can understand. It's as if you're working with 2 different languages. Imagine that JavaScript thinks and works in Spanish and Storyline speaks English. So Storyline will say, "How are you?" And before JavaScript can answer this, it will have to translate "How are you?" to Spanish, then formulate a response in Spanish, then translate it back to English before sending it back to Storyline so that Storyline can understand it. With that said, let's have a look at my JavaScript code. So this first line of code creates a JavaScript variable called player, and the function getPlayer returns the Storyline player. This line of code here creates a JavaScript variable called JSVar01, which will hold the value of the Storyline variable var01. This next line of code here creates a JavaScript variable called JSCount to hold the value of the Storyline variable called count. And this block of code here performs a test. It's going to test whether JSVar01 is true or false. When the quiz starts, the card is not selected, so the value of the variable is false. If we're executing this action, the user has clicked on this card, which means that we need to change the value of this variable to true. And this is what this line of code does here. It changes the variable to true. And we also need to increase the value of count by 1, which is what this line of code does here. And if JSVar01 has a value of true, then that means that the card was already selected when the user clicked on it. And by clicking on the card now, the user has deselected it. So what we need to do is to change the value of the variable to false, which is what this line of code does here. And we need to decrease the value of count by 1, which is what this line of code does. Okay? And then this next line of code here, it assigns the value of JSVar01, which is a JavaScript variable, to var01, which is a storyline variable, so that storyline can use this variable. And finally, this line of code here, it assigns the value of JSCount, which is a JavaScript variable, to count, which is a storyline variable, so that it can be used by storyline. So let's close this box. Unfortunately, we can't preview a slide that has JavaScript on it, so we have to publish it, which I've already done. So let's have a look at the already published slide. So if we select the first card here, the value of count goes up by 1, and also the value of the variable that's tracking whether the card is selected or not changes to true, as you can see. Deselect the card, and the value of count goes down by 1, and the value of the variable that is tracking whether the card is selected or not changes to false. The submit button will become enabled once we've selected 4 cards. So let's select the correct answers. Click on submit, and we get the feedback that we expect. To be honest, I wasn't very fond of Storyline's standard feedback, so I decided to create my own, and I'll show you what I did in part 5. So I'll see you soon.